Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Football Experience brought to you on the pod. I'm back with Caleb, and how you doing today?
I'm doing good, man. Got through the midweek fixtures of football. Just looking forward to talking about what I saw and hearing about what you saw.
I think we have a lot to break down, especially in one of the games, and
Definitely, I think I know where you're going as well.
yeah,
We're going straight to Bologna in Italy, aren't we? Where Inter just lost their grip on that Serie A title.
of course, I was definitely gonna go there. But in all seriousness, though, look, I'm gonna let you take the reins with the Man City Real Madrid game. But just before I do let you go into that, all I'm going to say to kick things off is wow. Wow, wow, wow.
Kind of like me with Benzema a couple weeks back. I think that sums it up, doesn't it? It was a great first leg, because I racked my brain after the game, um, and I try to think of other great ties, and you've got a lot of other great ties. I mean, you've got Roma coming back to knock out Barcelona in the second leg of that one. You've got Liverpool coming back against Barcelona in the second leg of that one. You've got Spurs against Ajax in the second leg of that one. But when you rack your brain, it's hard to find great first legs like this, where, and especially ones you can find first legs where two teams played pretty well or really well, but one team asserted their dominance in the leg. So you think of maybe that semi-final where Guardiola took his buy inside to the new camp and Messi put on a show in the last 15 minutes. Remember, he tried to man mark all over the pitch that day, Guardiola, against that Barcelona team in 14-15. Um, you think of you think of Liverpool going at Man City a few seasons ago in that quarter final at Anfield and taking a 3-0 lead, really high quality, high intensity game. But again, a team came away looking like they had the thing wrapped up. Even that Liverpool Barcelona first leg of that semi final, I thought again a really high quality game. Liverpool were unlucky in it, but at the end of the day, the score was 3-0 to Barcelona. So you think that team's gone through. At the end of this one, the score's 4-3 and away goals are gone. So it's really all up in the air. It's almost as level as it can be, um, which is just crazy because maybe the only other one I can think of that was kind of like this was Monaco against City, I think in 17-18, where Monaco actually knocked them out. And I think that was 4-2, maybe 5-2 in that first leg. That was two teams going at each other again, but it was just really refreshing to see because normally you see, and you can even contrast it to this morning's games, last night for you, or game, where that was a more traditional first leg of a semi final. But this one, I guess you've got, well, and we'll go deeper into the game, but at the end of it, you've got to say City won't be happy because of the chances they had, but they did also win the game. They are a goal up, and any advantage that you take, I feel, is a good advantage, especially against a team as good as Real Madrid. But just a really great tie and really sets us up really nicely for the second. So I'm going to feed off you because I know you really wanted to talk about this game. You wanted to do the live react, which would have been fun, but I know your energy's still high for this game. So I'm going to feed off what you got and we'll go deeper into this game because there's so much to talk about.
Well, yeah, like when the game actually happened, I was like super high on adrenaline, and since I don't have a team necessarily in this fixture or in the Champions League semi-final that I'm actually supporting, I'm coming in as a neutral. Like I was just like, again, I was just wow, because it felt like from 0 to 90, it was almost like, for instance, first off, it was almost like City were on a shot clock. Like they weren't just keeping possession at the back and then building up their attacks, like, and taking, like, up to 5 minutes to build up an attack. It almost felt like they were creating a chance every 1 or 2 minutes. like whether it was a gilt-edged chance, which they had plenty of, or whether it was like a half chance or like something that resulted in, a corner or a goal kick, and but it was pretty much attacking football from either team really for the entire 90. And this would be a perfect game, I believe, to show someone that has never watched football before, and if you want to get them into football, sort of like if you're sort of like you have your favorite TV show and you want to get someone into it, this would be a perfect game to start someone off of. There's obviously you obviously listed off a bunch of games in recent memory in the past, but I think that this one tops them. As if you're taking it as a standalone game, because you sort of mentioned as a like comparing it as a Champions League first leg semi-final. So you're probably weighting it based on importance as well. Like a second leg is obviously more important than the first leg because the second leg is actually the one that knocks you out. And you also touched on it. City, I think they should be disappointed because that easily should have been. I'm gonna say 10. Like that should have been 10 goals to City. Really, like they had that many.
Come on, calm down.
If you know, but I think if you look at the like, I'm not talking about half chances. I think if you look at just the like, for instance, the Bernardo Silva goal, that was a half chance that resulted in a goal. Like you don't expect him to pick up that ball and then slot it into the top corner at the near post from that kind of angle. That's a half chance that resulted in a goal. But then you had gilt-edged chances that didn't result in goals because they either made the wrong decision or it was saved. Like for the first one that immediately pops into mind is, I think at 2-0, Mahrez is played through, and instead of squaring it, he tries to rifle it into the near post top corner with his right foot, so with his weak foot, instead of squaring it to Foden, who's running in at the back post. That's a gilt-edged chance that should have resulted in a goal. Then you obviously have in the second half, just before their third goal, Mahrez hits the post, and then Foden, with his first touch, he kicks it into Milito, I think, cleared it off the line, if I'm not mistaken. But that also should have resulted in a goal. Those are just two gilt-edged chances. So, and along with a whole host of other chances that they did create. So that could have easily been up to 10 goals. I'll change my stance, up to 10 goals. And then if you also look at the goals that Real Madrid scored, the first goal there's no mistakes there. That was an absolute beauty of a goal, and we'll obviously go into the analysis of each goal as well. But like the other two goals, they were mistakes. You had Fernandinho he tries to nick the ball against Vinicius, tries to do the exact same thing that he did for the third goal, and this time Vinicius is more clued up to it and just dummies the ball, lets it go through both their legs, and then runs 50 yards from the halfway line and then up to the 6-yard box and slots it into the goal. And you had miscommunication between Laporte and Zinchenko, because Laporte should have gone and closed down that space, but he stayed with Benzema. So he had two players marking Benzema. So that was 100% a mistake, like two mistakes in that play. And then the third goal was obviously a penalty. So, someone stupidly leaving their arm hanging, and you can argue, like you're using your arms for leverage, but the arm was so outstretched that I'm trying to think like how, like, I'm trying to visualize how I jump when going up for headers, and I don't think my arm is ever out, like fully outstretched almost. I'm pretty sure it's always like tucked, like elbows tucked in, and hands are slightly around shoulder width. It's never I'm never getting the full wingspan of my hand or my arms. So that was a clear mistake. But yeah, like City, they will be disappointed that it resulted in 4-3 instead of 6-3 or 7-2 or something along a much bigger scoreline than what it was. So I don't know if you agree with my thoughts on any of that. And if you want to go into the goals, but and I'll also say it almost felt like each goal was better than the previous goal as well. Like the first goal was an absolute beauty. For some reason I can't remember the second goal. If you can remind me.
That was that Jesus with Alaba trying to win the ball in the 6-yard box?
Okay, yeah. That one wasn't as good as the first goal, but then the third goal was very nice. The of City.
The dream.
The fourth goal was very very nice by City. And then Real Madrid's first goal was fantastic. Their second goal was even better than the first goal. Arguably, it depends on what your style is of how you rate goals. Then the third goal was that's probably the one that tops the lot, really. But yeah, I'll
the pen?
Yeah.
Oh, I love it because of the audacity, but the first Benzema goal and the run from Vinicius. I can't put a penalty above, but I love the character on the pen.
But if you put the context around it, do you know?
Well,
Benzema missed 3 of his last 4 penalties going into that one.
No, I know.
And then he goes with a bloody Panenka.
Wow. That was the Dan 06 World Cup final. That's what I thought when I saw it. Yep. He even might have tried to shave the crossbar. He got so much elevation on it.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, look, I'll let you take it away and analyze how you thought the game went, and go goal by goal if you want.
Well, in listening to you talk about this game and how City could have up to 10 goals. It kind of sounded like you were surprised that they didn't. And then in analysing Real Madrid and how they got their goals and how they only relied on moments, I agree with your complete analysis, but I would contend that we already knew who these teams were going into this game, and they proved it perfectly in the contrast between them, because what we've been saying it all season for City. They don't have a number 9. They don't have a clinical goal scorer. It doesn't even need to be a striker nowadays. But who's the guy who's going to constantly get you the goals? And they don't have it. I mean, De Bruyne is getting closer, but he's still a midfielder at the end of the day. So, and I thought I was watching it on the Australian broadcast, and they said something interesting after the game. How could you imagine what Man City would be if they had Karim Benzema up front? And I thought that perfectly summarised it, because then you've got someone who can play in your style of play, but then also be the guy to get the goals at the end of it all. So, and who knows? I mean, all the talk of Haaland, but that's what it looked like to me. It looked like City were living up to what we thought of them in the season, even though they scored 4 goals. But you're right, they created enough chances to have more than that. And then Real Madrid, they relied on moments. You talk about how the game was open for the first and how City went out to the 2-0 lead. And I don't think Real Madrid were that open by design. I just think this is Real Madrid. They're chaotic at the back. And that's what I wrote in my notes, the chaotic back four of Real Madrid. And then feeding into that and leading to even more chaos is the absence of Casemiro, who is one of, if not the best holding midfielder in the world. Because you look at the first goal from De Bruyne, I'm not 100% sure that if Casemiro's playing, he's not sort of shielding the defenders to kind of be in the way of that cross, or getting tighter on the cross from Mahrez in the first place, because I trust his defensive instincts so much in front of Alaba and Militao. So I'm not 100% sure that goal happens in the first place. I know the second goal wouldn't happen if it was Casemiro instead of Kroos, because Kroos doesn't drop far enough back in, and he gives that sort of scuffed cross the line to get into the 6-yard box in the first place. If Casemiro's there, I trust him to be in the right position to just easily clear that away. And what he does is he almost allows that back four of Real Madrid to be chaotic, because Militao and Alaba, I mean, the first goal, I believe Militao got dragged all the way out to the right-hand touchline, and then it might have been the first or the second. I can't remember now. But I think for both the first two goals, the centre-back got dragged all the way out, almost to the touchline. And what happens if Casemiro is there? He just clogs up the space. It's no big deal. I'm acting as the centre-back. Let you get back in, and then I'll go back into my holding role. But without that, you could really feel the absence. And who knows? Maybe that led into. Well, I don't think it led into City playing a more open game. I think City were missing their regular fullbacks. And while Zinchenko was great in possession, he wasn't great going back. He didn't make the most egregious mistakes. I mean, Stone started to get sloppy before he came off, and then obviously Fernandinho. And I thought it was really, I would say, good to see what happened in terms of Fernandinho coming on, stealing that ball and setting up the third City goal, and then no less than 2 minutes later, exactly the same situation leads to Real Madrid's goal. And I thought that was fantastic to see, because if only the first situation happened and City won 3 or 4-1 this game, then we'd be turning around and say, oh, Fernandinho, fantastic experience. He just knew that he had to go in there and win that ball, and he knew he could set something up. But then it was great, because 2 minutes later, we saw what the flip side of that decision could be when you do something like that. And Vinny just rolled him and went all the way to the goal. And I agree, Laporte has to go in closer. I don't know what part Zinchenko's played, because you got to think that Zinchenko's going to be yelling at Laporte to get to that ball after he's marking Benzema. So maybe there's a breakdown in communication there. But at some point, Laporte... Well, to be fair, Rodri did nearly get there as well. So if Rodri gets a toe on that, then we think Laporte's decision to stay back isn't all that egregious. But yeah, he should have got there a bit quicker. But I thought they lived up to what we thought about these teams. And I don't know what you would think about that, because yeah, that's what I saw in the tie, even though it was such a great and gripping tie.
I think I agree with most of those points. The game, like for the first 20, 25 minutes, Man City really took it to Real, and Real were just in shambles. Like they couldn't really deal with the press. Modric was barely getting on the ball. Kroos was... like what you said with Casemiro. And Casemiro, I don't know, I think apparently he was on the bench, so I'm not sure if he's coming back from an injury, but he wasn't like suspended for this game, I believe, because he made the bench. But yeah, missing Casemiro, I think, as that shield behind the midfield and in front of the defense, that it looks like, in hindsight now, it looks like it was a massive part or integral part of the team that was missing. But yeah, for those first 20, 25 minutes, I just thought, this is the Kevin De Bruyne show. Like, it seemed like he was driving at that defense. Like, he was picking up the ball in midfield and driving and playing balls through and setting up goals as well, scoring them. And it just seemed like this was his night to take over, essentially. But then we started seeing some mistakes come in from Man City. Like I think like Stones gave away the ball. I think Edison gave away the ball once to Vinicius as well. Like directly, and like so you started seeing some very uncharacteristic mistakes around, like just prior to Real Madrid's first goal. And I wouldn't necessarily say that Real Madrid's first goal came from a mistake, but because you had, I think Mahrez and Modric, they both went in for pretty much like sliding challenges on a 50-50 ball. Obviously, Modric just won out on that, which makes it fall to Mendy. With Benzema did get on for Benzema, he got on the right side of Zinchenko, but yeah, what you mentioned, like Zinchenko looked fantastic in possession, but yeah, it's a little bit fragile defending. Sort of, I wouldn't say sort of reminds me of Trent, where he can be fragile at the back, because I think Trent is more solid at the back than Zinchenko. But I think even when I'm looking back at the City-Liverpool game, Zinchenko seemed very suspect at the back as well in that position. Probably because he hadn't played in so long. I think that was his first game in I don't know how many weeks. And then obviously who knows what kind of frame of mind he's in because of everything that's going on in Ukraine at the moment. But yeah, like he showed two sides to his game. But it was pretty much dominated by City, and like I think that's very easy for anyone to agree on. And what you mentioned also, where the Fernandinho Vinicius duel, it showed both sides of that sort of coin, like perfectly encapsulated that. Like where if your defender manages to nick it, they can play on the counter. If he manages to get done, he's through on goal. And it would have been interesting to see whether those mistakes or those opportunities happened if Walker and Cancelo play. So it's an interesting takeaway. I'm not sure whether Walker will be available for the second leg or not, but I'm pretty sure Cancelo will be, because that was just a suspension. So he'll probably slot in at right back, and Zinchenko will be at left back. So you'll have slightly different duels occurring for that.
Yeah, and the duels in any matchups are so important, but particularly when Vinicius is such a weapon for Real Madrid and such a release valve, because he's the outball and he lets them. Well, he might not be the first outball. Maybe it'll go into Benzema, but then Benzema will find Vinicius, or at least put it in behind for him to run. So my belief is I don't think it will be Walker back. I know Cancelo should be back because he's, like you say, was a suspension. But there's no way that even if Walker made the same mistake as Fernandinho and went in on that second Real Madrid goal, I still trust that he probably has the pace to get back in and stop Vinicius going all the way anyway, when you think that Vinicius has to run with the ball all that way. So he's absolutely massive. We've talked about how City's fullbacks, particularly those two, are so important to their containing play and applying pressure to the opposition by not letting them in behind. And we saw what happens when they're not available as well. So while we're talking about individuals, I wanted to talk about the first individual in this game who, I mean, didn't catch my eye because I think we all know how good he is, but he made me put him in the list of those midfielders that I talk about quite often. Those midfielders who can do the job of two players in there. And when you look at this guy, I mean, I guess we've already seen it in Conte, so you don't need to be a certain type. But I mean, if you looked at Bernardo Silva, you wouldn't think he's that type of player. But my God, in that first half, he was absolutely everywhere. He was picking up the ball in central midfield. He was picking it up as the holding midfielder. He was playing it. And then literally a few seconds later, he would be on the right wing, or he'd be on the left wing, or he'd be applying the counter press in the number 10 position. He was everywhere. His motor is incredible. He gets around the pitch, and then he still has the energy. I think there was one in the first half, he tracked all the way back on someone, and then he still had the energy to make a forward run off the back of that and look for the ball. And then he's such a good technical player that you can give him the ball and you can trust him in all those spaces. I mean, he well and truly is one of the world's best central midfielders now, without a doubt. And the fact that he is now an out-and-out central midfielder, I believe. While you can still use him in the other positions like the false nine or out wide, his best position is central midfield. And I mean, if you looked at him, you wouldn't think, if you looked at him earlier in their careers as well, you wouldn't think Bernardo Silva would be the one playing deeper than Kevin De Bruyne in the team, but that's how it is. And he does such a fantastic job. And it sort of got me thinking as well about another player who's been exceptional this season, obviously, and is really coming through. But you can see a similar trajectory through his career in probably Phil Foden, because at the moment Phil Foden plays across that front three, but I think there's a lot of expectation and a lot of belief that his abilities will translate to him being a central midfielder one day if need be. But while he's still got his dynamism, you probably want to use him in the front three. But I just think that's a fantastic situation for Manchester City to have this guy in Bernardo Silva, who's one of the world's best and has similar attributes to a player who's young and up and coming, and who he can mentor for the coming years. So that's a great situation for City. And Bernardo Silva, just wow, he amazed me. Luka Modric, I mean, it's no surprise, but the thing that really stood out to me was just his reading of the game. He sees what his team needs and when his team need it, and he does it. So I think there was, maybe when they were still 2-0 down, there was a moment where I think he had to track his central midfielder into a gap that Alaba left because Alaba was off pressing somewhere as usual. And he did it, and he did it no fuss. I think he won the ball back and then it played out. And then, as you say, that 50-50 that led to the first Real Madrid goal, he knew that the team needed a spark, so he just wanted that ball more than Mahrez, and he got to it first. And then a bit of fortune in how it ricochets out to Mendy. And I mean, honestly, I think in terms of Real Madrid's goals, that Benzema one was the best one, and it was the most crucial one because that was out of nothing. I mean, we talk about Zinchenko. Yeah, he shouldn't let him get in front of him, but he didn't do anything really wrong. It's not even a chance. And Benzema just puts it in the corner like it's nothing. This guy, I mean, on to the next individual, and it's just a theme of these podcasts after Champions League nights, but Karim Benzema, my God, what a player. 9 out of 11 of Real Madrid's knockout stage goals now. And as you say, it's your favourite goal, but that exclamation mark of a Panenka in that moment where your team really needs it, just wonderful. What a player. Honestly, the highest level of consecutive performances when his team had to have it, because this Real Madrid team isn't really like, to steal a basketball term, a super team. It's not a super team. It's a team with a good spine who has good experience, but it's aging as well. We've talked about the aging midfield. We've talked about the ages of Luka Modric, Toni Kroos. So just for him to be so important and the whole team to revolve around him in this way, and for him to have to do so much. We talk about the link-up play, but then score the goals on top of it and just be the spark when his team needs it. Just unreal, really, truly unreal, the performances that guy's putting in. Yeah, that was individuals. There's probably and I just wanted to touch on something about how the game shifted, how you were saying Man City were making mistakes. And you know what was interesting? We've talked about you talked about the Mahrez chance where he wanted to rifle it into the near post. Guardiola's reaction to that was a little too intense because it elicited Mahrez to actually go back at him while he was trying to tell him on the pitch. I just thought that Guardiola slightly overreacted. Like, he might have believed he should have squared it, but I don't think Mahrez took well to sort of his manager chastising him on the pitch in front of 50,000 people. I don't think he really liked that. And I think it's easy to say in hindsight, but it maybe put a little bit of edginess into City. And then it's no surprise that after that, well, it might be no coincidence that Real Madrid get their goal after that. So I just thought that was an interesting thing to touch on. I don't know if it's because of that, that's speculation, but there's certainly something that you can maybe see in that, and we know how tightly strung Guardiola gets for ties like this. I don't know if you have any more individuals to go on to, or any other points on what you saw.
Not really. Like just on that Guardiola comment. Like yeah, like I'm not sure I've really seen him that irate over a chance in like the 25th minute, something like that. Like if that was the 90th minute, fair enough. Like any manager will react like that. But they're 2-0 up, and he reacts like that. Like yes, that would have put that would have probably put the tie to bed. But yeah, like I think you've touched on. There's actually this is like one of those games where there's so much to talk about, whether it's individuals, whether it's moments or anything like that. Like it's and like because there's so much talking points, it's hard to talk about everything because some things you might forget as well, and then you'll come back to it later and like, damn, I forgot to mention this thing. I will also give I know over the last 2 or 3 podcasts we've been sort of especially on the last one, we were a little bit on the back of the referees. I think the referee was very good in this game. Let the game flow. Wasn't really. I don't think he was card happy. Was there any yellow cards? In all honesty, like I'm not even sure if there was a yellow card given out. Two yellow cards, one for each team in the whole game. Like that's nothing almost. And also for that third goal, for the Bernardo Silva's goal, where he lets play go on, like he's intelligent enough to read the play, and it ends up resulting in a goal as well. Like I thought that was like a free kick, and then ends up being play on, and goal happens out of that. So props to the referee. And I think if you have anything else to add on to that, I guess we can move on to the less exciting fixture of the semi-finals.
Well, yeah. Before we do, obviously, I agree. That's a really fantastic piece of refereeing to let the game go on and let it breathe, and all in all, and we'll probably touch on this in the next part about the next game we're going to talk about. But the referee let the game breathe and let the players play. He wasn't falling for any play acting that would go on. He was just. There was little touch fouls. He just let it go. Like it's a touch. We're not awarding free kicks for that. Let the game go on. If there's not enough contact to bring it back, let's let the game go on. And refs obviously play a massive part in the excitement of games. They can anyway. They don't always, but if they let it breathe, I always feel like they're more exciting games to watch. I mean, I'm not talking about like physical assault out there and stuff. I'm talking about touch fouls. So I just think there comes a point where it's like stand up and play. We want to watch football. We don't want to watch this tactical sort of mind games bullshit. But on the Guardiola point, and it's just the last thing that I wanted to talk about before we got off this game, and it'll probably lead to a good segue into the next game, because I want to just talk about, because you spoke about the start of the game again. I'll touch on. And you spoke about how much pressure City were putting on Real Madrid. And I honestly think that the relentless nature of Manchester City and Liverpool is very much attributed to the fact that they're rivals, and to the fact that their managers are vying for the best manager, to be the best manager in the world, really. And they just push each other to new levels. So you talk about City applying pressure. I mean, Guardiola teams, I don't think you can really remember a team that sort of applied pressure in this way. And I think it's something that they've probably seen Liverpool doing in recent years. And they look to apply more pressure with balls into the heart of defence. I mean, you see City's first 2 goals come from crosses that are just, I wouldn't say they're nothing crosses. The Mahrez one, I think he does pick out De Bruyne, but the second one is just sort of a cross in. And it's one that, hey, let's just put a bit of pressure on the heart of that defence. and let's see if they're going to crack. And even if they don't crack, if they clear it, they've got to get their clearance right. If they scuff it, we'll go again, and we'll just keep applying pressure. And then, I mean, I don't need to say about the counter presses are so similar. Liverpool and City, the fact that they'll put this pressurizing ball on, and then they'll be fully expecting for the second ball to drop somewhere, and they'll be reacting quicker than most teams to get to that second ball. And even if they don't get to the second ball first, the other team, the fact that they're clearing it out from their box means that usually your players can't receive that ball facing forward. So you can apply that pressure that forces them back towards their own goal. And then the forward players are so quick to pounce on pressing from a different angle from the front. So, and again, I mean, Guardiola's teams have always been renowned for winning the ball back quickly after they've lost it, but I don't think I've seen it in this way, because they would prefer to keep the ball more. Whereas this City team, particularly this year, I think they're all right to go a little bit more direct. I mean, they're not going to hoof it from back to front, maybe even in the same way that Liverpool do a lot of the time, but they'll play through the lines. But then when they get there, hey, we'll put on pressure. We'll put a ball into the box. We're not going to look to score the perfect goal every time. And then even if we don't score from that, we'll get the counter press. And that's very much what you see with Liverpool, no doubt about it. And similarly, you see Liverpool probably, and we'll talk about it in the second leg, or in the second game, sorry. But you see Liverpool with they bring in a player like Thiago, because I think Klopp saw, hey, we can do all that heavy metal stuff really well, but we need to be able to play a bit and control the game a little bit more, much in the way that City can. So he brings in that technical midfielder like Thiago, who is playing just fantastically well at the moment, just controlling the tempo for that Liverpool team. He's really fit into the speed of that team. But I just think when you watch these two teams and the fact that they're on such a collision course this season in seemingly everything, they're just pushing each other to new heights. And their relentlessness from both teams it's awesome to watch. They're almost like machines, both of them. So that was just something, and I'm sure that segues nicely into talk about the next game. And that's just something I was thinking about when I was watching this game as well.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head, and I just want to add to that. They seem like, especially this season, they seem like very, very similar teams, with very, very slight differences. Like you mentioned that their counter press is very, very similar. I think Liverpool are a little bit more aggressive in their pressing than just the slightest margins. City are better at keeping the ball and retaining the ball amongst their back four and midfield, but then Liverpool are better in their finishing. So there's like slight differences in different areas, but yeah, it's actually amazing to watch. And if we saw a glimpse of what a knockout tie can look like between these teams, albeit it was a semi-final of an FA Cup, but you said collision course, we could potentially get a final between these two teams. And usually I hate finals between two teams from the same nation, and if we go back in like the previous years, those finals have more or less been on the boring side. But I don't think either of these two managers, especially against each other, will come into a final, a Champions League final, I guess, with a more defensive approach or slightly more cautious approach. I think they'll go at each other, which they have been over the last couple of games over the season. And fingers crossed that we get that final. But yeah, I think we should then lead into the other semi-final tie, Liverpool Villarreal. I told you this morning, like you asked me, am I excited to talk about the semi-finals, or can't remember what your question exactly worded your question was. But I said my response was no, not after last night's game. Like it just took all the excitement and the adrenaline out of me. No fault to Liverpool. Like it takes two teams to tango. I think that Liverpool were technically at fault for creating what transpired, but not because not through lack of their effort, but more because they did not allow Villarreal to play. It seemed like they strangled them, and Villarreal could only play with 5 players, which was their back line, their goalie and their back line. And maybe one of their midfielders, but once their midfielder got it, Liverpool pretty much won the ball back, and that seemed to happen time and time again. They couldn't get it up to their forwards to hold up the ball. Maybe because their main striker, I think Moreno, was missing. I'm not sure if that's injury or suspension. I'm pretty sure it's injury. So, yeah, sure, you're missing your striker, and maybe you could sort of compare that to Real Madrid missing Benzema for the Barcelona game a couple of weeks ago, although not to that level, but a similar sort of concept in terms of importance of a forward player sort of bringing everything together when you're trying to play out from the back the way that Villarreal do. But yeah, I'll maintain my position that Liverpool caused this tie to be so boring based on their dominance of Villarreal and not allowing Villarreal to breathe. So I'll hand it over to you to see. I don't know whether you agree with that simplified analysis, but for me there was less talking points in this tie than in the other tie.
Yeah, man, I think I agree with how you put it in terms of Liverpool really forced this tie, in your words, to be boring. But they, and it was, I honestly think in terms of balance and how Liverpool played, it was one of their best performances from that aspect in a long time. I completely concur with you in saying the entertainment factor that you normally see from a Liverpool performance because the game's so open wasn't there as much. But if I was a manager, and I think my coaching style is quite different to Jurgen Klopp's. It's maybe closer to the Guardiola model of more control over games. But in terms of control over a game, this was the best I've seen Liverpool play in a while. They gave up really no chances of note. Maybe a few half chances, which you can't. You're in the semi-finals of the Champions League. You're not going to stop a team as good as Villarreal from at least creating half chances, but nothing really of note. The way the midfield sort of were able to control the game, keep the ball moving. Thiago, obviously, a huge part in that. Yeah, the chances were there, but I thought they were applying enough pressure. And you talk about how Liverpool strangled and they forced this game to lack that entertainment factor. And it was really good. It was good to see because when you watched this tie, you could almost contrast it to the Bayern tie in the quarterfinal that Villarreal got to, and you could see exactly where I believe Liverpool are a superior team to Bayern Munich this season. You could see it in the fact that in that game at the Allianz, and let's start at that point, the stadium difference. And I'm not saying anything against Bayern Munich fans, but it's the Allianz is not Anfield. So when Liverpool had their moments of applying pressure, the pressure is 2 or 3 notches higher just for the fact that you're in Anfield on the semi-final night of a Champions League. It's different. So I think that's a starting point right there. But then in terms of the football, Liverpool asked maybe the same questions that Bayern did in that quarterfinal second leg in terms of put balls into the box. I thought Bayern probably could have done it a bit more. Liverpool didn't relent. So there's a difference straight away. And then the big difference was, and we say this, it's almost like a theme when we talk about City and Liverpool, but the counter press. Liverpool are a different animal than Bayern Munich in that. With Lewandowski and Muller up front for Bayern, you could see that Villarreal in that game, while they didn't control possession and they didn't control territory in that game. But the moments where Bayern gave up the ball and Villarreal had the ball, Villarreal had a confidence to play in that game. And they could get the ball into Capui and they could get the ball into Parejo in particular. And they were able to start patterns out of those guys. But Parejo in particular, because he's a very good deep lying playmaker like that. And against Bayern, they could have their moments. They could have somewhat comfortable possession on the ball because the counter press was there. Against Liverpool, no chance. They were able to have no comfortable moments on the ball. While I thought Fabinho could have played a lot better in possession of the ball today, his work out of possession was absolutely fantastic. He's another one who's very much in that Casemiro role mold, where they shield and then they go back in if they need to, and they protect fullbacks, and then they can also go in and press higher as well. So I thought he was immense in terms of that sort of containing play. Whenever you have a midfielder with Henderson in there, his counter press, his reaction is always go and win the ball back straight away. Mane was fantastic in that aspect today. Salah always puts in his work. Diaz always puts in his work. The thing I'm really impressed with Diaz is he plays with so much aggression, but for a player who hasn't been playing at this level very long, he already looks like he plays with controlled aggression. Because often you see players come in and they want to play with aggression, but sometimes it leads to stupid mistakes, particularly in the press. And that's such an important part of Liverpool's game that you can't have stupid mistakes and uncontrolled aggression in those moments. So that's one of the biggest things that's really impressed me about him is how much control he shows while playing with that aggression, which you need. But yeah, I thought you summarised the game well because I thought Villarreal were trying to play in their moments. We knew that they wouldn't dominate the game, far from it. We knew that. But they still were, even in this game, they were still, when they had the ball, they tried to play. And Liverpool was so smart in this game in the fact that they were so quick on the counter press, but also if the counter press was a little bit late, they weren't afraid to foul. They got a lot. They racked up a lot of fouls in that central midfield area to stop Villarreal from breaking. I know Van Dijk picked up a yellow card for his charge. He nearly split Chukwueze in two with that one. I thought it was a bit harsh. I thought he was just being penalised for being big in that moment, but it is what it is. But he stopped the counter attack. Another interesting thing, and we touched on it going into the game, is how this game was so similar to the Everton game on the weekend. Obviously, Villarreal possessed more quality, tried to play a little bit more, but Liverpool upped their game as you'd expect for a Champions League semi-final as well. So we almost saw the same game, really, just with a few more chances for Liverpool, a few shots on target in the first half. But they had to wait, they had to be patient. But then if you defend like that, and Klopp always says it, if you defend deep, you leave yourself more open to an unkind bounce of the ball. And that's exactly what Villarreal got for the first goal and what Liverpool, you'd say earned for that goal, even though it was very fortuitous the way it came about. And then they were able to make it two in real quick time. And I know a lot of the pundits were pointing it out, but if your game plan is to go in and not concede a goal, once you concede that goal, it's easy just to let up that 5-10%. That coupled with the old cliche of you're at your most vulnerable when you score a goal. Obviously, it's the opposite for this, but it's still that kind of break in play where players can lose their concentration once a goal goes in. And sort of Villarreal somewhat opened up. Mo Salah with a fantastic pass through the legs, perfectly weighted as well. So tight on the offside, but a really nice goal. So, yeah, I definitely go along with your assertion that Liverpool strangled Villarreal and maybe strangled the entertainment out of the game in this. But in terms of a balanced performance as a Liverpool supporter, I'm very happy with that performance because it's maybe their best one, maybe of the season. Because we can't underestimate that this is the Champions League semi-finals, and Villarreal have earned the right to be there. They beat Juve convincingly, and yes, they rode their luck a little bit against Bayern, but I thought they took advantages of where Bayern's flaws were. So all in all, really happy to. It was a perfect old school Champions League performance in that we didn't concede at home as well. So, but obviously away goals don't count anymore. So to go in 2-0 up into that second leg is a really strong position.
I'm just going to make 2 points, or one's a question, one is a point. You mentioned the Everton game, the similarities of it. I actually thought Everton played better. Like, the Everton game was more exciting, slightly more exciting, and Everton caused you more problems. Not necessarily like gilt-edged chances, but they created some questions. Villarreal didn't create any questions of your midfield, let alone your defense. And my question is, firstly, I'm not 100% sure on the rules at the moment. With the yellow card rules, and you mentioned Van Dijk picking up a yellow, does Klopp rest Van Dijk? Because I'm pretty sure the yellow cards aren't wiped before the final. They're wiped, I think, before the semi-final. So Van Dijk is going into the second leg with already on a yellow card. If he picks up another, I'm pretty sure he misses the final. Do you then rest Van Dijk if you're Klopp with a risk of him potentially getting a yellow? And I'll also add that I haven't actually seen Van Dijk pick up many cards at all. So compared to other defenders like Ramos or someone like that who picks up a yellow card in every single game, Van Dijk is very disciplined, and this is like is one of his first yellow cards that I've seen in weeks. So that's my question. Do you rest Van Dijk considering you're 2-0 up, or do you take the risk?
That's a really good question. It's one that I hadn't really thought of. For me personally, I have too much respect for Villarreal, and I have too much respect for the fragility of football and how positions change so quickly to make such a bold statement as to resting maybe your most important player. I think you've got to get to the final first. But at the same time, if he picks up a yellow card and Liverpool, I don't know, draw the game 0-0 in a game that looks like they would have drawn anyway, and then all of a sudden you're without your arguably most important player for a final against either or Real Madrid or Man City, you need him for that game. So there is no doubt a dilemma. For me, I don't do it because, like you said as well, he's not a player who picks up many yellow cards, and he's not a player who normally needs to pick up many yellow cards because he can rely on his physical and his defensive talents to not have to do that. But yeah, for me, you got to play him because it's not a 4-0, it's not even a 3-0, and I do respect this Villarreal team. And you know, if you go into that leg, you're not playing with Virgil van Dijk, and then you concede in the first 15 minutes, that game becomes a hell of a lot trickier than it needed to be. So for me, you got to get there first. I'm sure he'll have a word with Van Dijk, and he'll make sure that. I'm not sure he needs to because Van Dijk will know the situation himself anyway. Can't pick up a yellow in this game. So you got to trust your player, and you've got to have respect for your opponent and the game in that situation. For me, but it'll be interesting to see what he does because he did play a very weak team after a 3-1 win in Benfica. It's not the same situation because we'll come back home then, but even that I thought was on the borderline because, like I say, they score in the first 10, 15 minutes and the game looks completely different. So he hasn't shown the aversion to flirting with the footballing gods like that, and for them wanting retribution with some sort of karma. So if he's already done it before, who knows, he might. But if that backfires, he won't hear the end of it. He'll get the Guardiola overthinking criticism for years to come if he does that and it doesn't work out. So for me, you respect the opponent, you respect the game, and you respect the intelligence of one of the best, if not the best, centre back in the world. By saying, look, go out there, don't pick up a yellow card, but make sure we get to the final.
Yeah, that's such a difficult one for any manager because, like, yeah, you said it's only a 2-0 cushion, and you're going to Villarreal Stadium with their fans. But it's almost 50-50 for me. Like, it's not like if that was Ramos, you 100% rest him. Like that's no doubt at all. But because it's Van Dijk and because he's so good, for me it was actually surprising that he picked up a yellow card at all. Really, but yeah, it's still a risk, and you literally have 1 foot in the final. And if he was to pick up a yellow card, like that's I then would say that the final, like, instead of being like a 50, if it's City Liverpool, instead of I slightly give the edge to City if it's City Liverpool final. But if you're missing Van Dijk, that's like, instead of being like a 55-45, I'd say that swings to like a 65 to 70% chance City get the edge on you because you're missing such an important player for the final. And if you have any other comments to that, but I also want to ask you with the.
All right. Well, wait before. So keep your question in mind, but before you go to your question, is there another player in the world who moves the needle as much as Virgil van Dijk for Liverpool if he's in or out of the team?
You probably would have said Messi or Ronaldo a couple of years ago. More so Messi.
Yeah, but right now, obviously. I can think of one straight off the top.
What, Benzema for Real?
It's got to be Benzema.
Yeah.
It's maybe the only one who moves the needle more than missing Van Dijk for Liverpool.
Yeah. But other than that, I wouldn't say so.
De Bruyne's
not really.
City is so systematically good that they can maybe survive it, can't they?
Yeah, that's why I didn't mention De Bruyne, because they have players that are almost to that ilk and can play. Like they can't fully replace him, but like they can fill like 80-90% of what he does.
Yeah, and another one who we saw it come to fruition when we'll talk about the first game, but Casemiro as well.
Yep. Yeah.
He's maybe one that you could throw in that category. And that's sort of like that leads me to think like about the contrast, because I think that these two teams, and if we do get this final, it'll be interesting to see, but these two teams are very similar to each other in Real Madrid and Liverpool. But as we're talking about Van Dijk and moving the needle and stuff, the key differences between those teams, other than, well, I would say one key difference is Karim Benzema up front, but I'd say Liverpool aren't very far off matching what he can do with more of a group effort with the front three, whoever the front three is that they play, whereas Benzema has to be with Vinicius in terms of attackers, and even then it's still 75% Benzema doing the work. He just needs the pace of Vinicius, really, because that's something that he obviously doesn't have, and which is so helpful. But the key difference between those teams is I look at Real Madrid and they want to play, when they do want to play in this way, and that's sort of squeezing on the ball and pressing and trying to win it back and playing more open game. They don't have the Van Dijk or even the Diaz type or even the Marquinhos type, the type who doesn't want to go in and win every ball and who's happier to just sit back kind of organized, but trust in his ability that if we get down to a one-on-one, then I'm gonna be solid in this one-on-one. I'm not gonna get beaten. And the scary thing about Liverpool is, and I've already touched on it, how they've sort of flipped the balance of what you see from traditional teams, in that their defender and their goalkeeper have to be almost the two most important players for that style of football. Because the thing is, Liverpool, it's like waves. It's like the first counter press comes in, and then can they win the ball back from that? No, they can't. Well, they've committed so many men to that counter press. Now they're spacing behind. But then once you hit that spacing behind, oh, Virgil van Dijk hasn't committed to that counter press, so he could sit back. Even Fabinho at times as well, so that he could sit back. But Fabinho and Casemiro, I think, are almost a one for one. You could maybe say Casemiro is a little bit better, but there's not much in that. But compared to like an Alaba and a Van Dijk, and I love David Alaba, but he's no Virgil van Dijk in terms of he's willing to sit back and do the one-on-one defending and organize around him. He wants to also go in and win the ball. So if you had a Van Dijk next to an Alaba, fantastic partnership. But when you have an Alaba next to a Militao, that's a suspect partnership, because they both want to do the same things. So my point is, you see all these teams like Bayern, even so many of their defenders want to go and press the ball and man mark and stop it at source. But for that to be successful, you need a centre back who's willing to sweep, or not quite sweep, but be more disciplined and hold their position and let others get in. And then B, you need a goalkeeper who can save the one-on-one situations, which is what Liverpool have. So if we do get that matchup, I just thought it was really interesting, because in a similar way that Casemiro moves the needle defensively for Real Madrid, I mean, it's hard to see a player who moves the needle more than Virgil van Dijk if he's missing from that Liverpool team.
Yeah, and we saw it last season with Van Dijk being injured. It seemed like there was, and obviously you had other centre backs that were injured as well, but I think Van Dijk was the biggest missing piece of the puzzle, and it seemed like there was, I don't know, it just seemed like there was some kind of, I'm not sure if chemistry is the right word, or cohesion, but it just seemed like there was something missing. Maybe not that defensive cohesion where your front five or front six are able to be so committed to that counter press. They have to be a little bit more defensive, because they don't have a Van Dijk sitting behind them, able to play 2v2 with the other centre back against their forwards, or 1v1 with the other forward. You didn't have that, so you probably didn't press as high and as ferociously as you do this season. Whereas now, Liverpool seems like they're more than comfortable with Alisson sweeping, and because they know that he's fantastic in the 1v1, if potentially a striker does slip through the gap between the fullbacks and the centre backs. But more or less, playing with the two centre backs and the goalkeeper, Liverpool are more than fine with that. They're more than fine with gambling, because they know that 8 or 9 times out of 10, especially Van Dijk is gonna win in that duel. Now,
well,
yeah,
and also before you go into your question, I love it how you said it nicely, the gap between the fullback and the centre back, because for Liverpool at times this season it's been a chasm, that space that's left there. But also, like, there's a lot of talk, and I even mentioned it maybe a week or two ago, about how it's interesting how Klopp always says you're playing the lottery when you sit back, but he also employs this style that is almost playing the lottery with the offside line. But when you've been doing it nearly for the whole season, and the defensive record is what it is for Liverpool, at what point does it stop being a gamble? And at what point does it become, no, you know what, you're actually playing to your strengths by doing this? You're not gambling, you're actually playing, hey, we trust that Virgil van Dijk can't be beaten one-on-one by anyone in the world. And even if he's beaten, we've got the goalkeeper who's the best in the world at one-on-ones. So you're almost just saying, we've got these tools. Why would we not play to them? I know it looks like we're being super open, and we are being super open, but at the same time, you're trusting these guys who are arguably the best goalkeeper in the world and the best centre back in the world to do their jobs to the level that they can do their jobs. So it's almost empowering these players and playing to their strengths.
Yeah, 100%. And I think they've gotten it down to a T, especially coming to the tail end of the season. Now I'm going to ask you, and it's not really anything to do with, it's more to do with scheduling, but Liverpool just played now on Wednesday. They're playing again on Saturday, and it's a 12:30 kickoff, and then they're playing again on Tuesday. So I think they only have a 6-day turnaround, and it will also lead into obviously our wrap up of the Premier League fixtures, or our review of the Premier League fixtures. But do you think that the Champions League needs to, especially when you're coming to these later stages and you have a team that's competing for 3 or 4 champion or titles, where a team, I know you have that alternating match day where, Liverpool, they just played now on Wednesday, and then they're playing on Tuesday, so they have a 6-day turnaround to play 3 games in. Whereas City now, they played on Tuesday, they're going to play on Wednesday, so they have 8-day turnaround to play 3 games in. So do you think that there needs to be some kind of change there in terms of the scheduling, or do you think it sort of balances out? Because we've seen, I think probably in the quarterfinals or even the round of 16, which, or even when we were doing the group stages, where you had that kind of short turnaround. Do you think that it balances out, or do you think that they should just keep it that if you play on the Tuesday, you play on the Tuesday? Otherwise, you're going to have a shorter turnaround. I don't know what your thoughts are with that, because Liverpool's going to, are they playing? They're playing away at Newcastle. So yes, they played at home, so it's a short trip for them, but they're still playing. They still need to travel to Newcastle, and not only that, it's a 12:30 kickoff as well. So it's not even like a nighttime kickoff, or even an afternoon kickoff for them. It's the early afternoon. So I don't know what your thoughts are on the scheduling around that.
Well, I mean, obviously, I could go full Arteta and thank the Premier League for their early scheduling of this next game, but
it's the Champions League. It's not really the Premier League. Yes, it's Premier League for this one, but it's also the Champions League scheduling you to play on a Wednesday and then play on a Tuesday.
Yeah, but that's always how the Champions League works. If you were the second game one week, you'll be the first game the week after. So that is what it is in terms of the Champions League, and it is what it is in terms of the Premier League, because the Premier League sort of damned if you do, damned if you don't, because if you give us an earlier kickoff on the weekend, then we get more time to recover before that next Champions League game, obviously. So that's the position there. And I mean, Liverpool, in terms of what we're dealing with in reality right now, without any changes to the schedule or anything, Liverpool have to be used to this by now. They've been in next game mode for probably a few months now, to be quite honest, where it's almost just like the next game is your cup final, and you keep rolling. You've just, every game means everything at this point, because we don't trust City to slip up, but we want to be there if they do. So really, in terms of everything, and that's the interesting thing, and you brought up questions about resting Van Dijk for the second leg. That's the interesting thing where you get to this stage of the Champions League, and they're almost the ties where you look to get a bit cheeky with it and rest players and try and get players rest where you can in terms of that competition. I mean, you wouldn't normally see that in any normal season in terms of going for the Champions League and resting players for a second leg semi-final. But yeah, in terms of how Liverpool will approach it, I think they'll just be the same. They'll roll on. There's absolutely no doubt that this is going to be a really tough test going to Newcastle, a Newcastle team who are building something. We'll probably touch on that in the previews, but they'll just roll on. In terms of my solution, I don't believe there is one in the current format of football, and I hate to sound like a broken record, but I think this is where that European Super League with a playoff system would really be I don't want to say beneficial, because I'd have to see it first, but I think it would be really interesting to see. because we get to this stage of the season and you look at three of the five major leagues. Um, three of the five are already decided. So now we've got teams, well, only really Real Madrid and Villarreal, I guess, to an extent. They're playing nothing games in the league between these Champions League ties, and then we've got a bunch of nothingness in the Bundesliga, a bunch of nothingness in Ligue 1, and a bunch of nothingness in La Liga. So I think if we had a playoff system and everything ratcheted up to this point of the season where there were no distractions from league football and all we were watching were the top teams going for the only prize really that matters in their eyes, which is that Super League title. I just think that the fact that there'd be no sort of distractions with that league football, I just think you could bring this level of scrutiny and this level of intensity and pressure to these games that's ratcheted up, maybe even more than we see with the Champions League now. Because in terms of like obviously what we do in terms of previewing and reviewing, it's sort of a never-ending cycle of football, and then your focus shifts from all right. I'm focusing on Serie A now. I'm focusing on La Liga now. I'm focusing on Champions League now. I'm focusing on Premier League. Imagine if you could just put all that focus into one playoff system where all the best teams are only playing for one title. I just think the sort of the scrutiny, the focus, the intensity you could bring onto those games, the meaningfulness. I just think it would be really interesting to see that, and I think that's a solution to what you're talking about in terms of schedule. But for how it is now, I just think that is what it is. Yeah, you can finagle it just a tad, so that if you play Wednesday, you just play next Wednesday in the Champions League. Maybe that's a better way of doing it, but like I said, you knew what the Champions League was when you went into it. You know, if you play on the Wednesday night one week, you'll play on the Tuesday night the next week. That's how it is. It's how it's been for years now. And you just deal with it and you get on with it.
There was also an interesting point that Thierry Henry brought up, and that's that if you're playing for these teams like your Reals, your Cities, your Liverpools, and they're always competing for 2 or 3, or in Liverpool's case, 4 trophies by this time of the season, your scheduling will start to look like this. But these teams, the only reason why these teams are competing is because they have the squads to compete, not just the starting 11s. So they're able to rotate their starting 11 so that they can compete on all fronts. So that was also an interesting point that he brought up, that it shouldn't matter because Liverpool can rest 3, 4, 5, or even all 11 players potentially for this tie against Newcastle. So that's also a point that when you sign as a player or when you sign as a manager, this is what you can expect, especially coming into the tail end of the season, because you're playing for or managing a top club.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It's I mean, if you're in Liverpool's situation and even Manchester City, trying to win a double now, but it's the 2 most important trophies left. But if you're like Liverpool and you're chasing history, the quadruple, I mean, it's got to be hard, and it's gonna be hard. And I think at this point, it's just all about embracing the challenge, and not looking for excuses, not looking to say, "Hey, the schedule's messed up. We shouldn't be playing here or there." Just get your head down and try and win the next game, whatever the conditions, whatever the circumstances. You know that if you get to the end of this and you're holding all 4 trophies and all 4 trophies are in your club's cabinet, then you know you would have had to come through some really tough tests to get that. So really, it's all about staying in the moment and staying looking at the next game whilst also recognizing what you're trying to accomplish in terms of history. You can't have qualms about, hey, we have to play so many games. Yeah, of course you have to play so many games. You're trying to win all 4 trophies. So that's just how it is, and you've got to embrace that challenge. I think there's no excuses in terms of schedules. You just your competitive drive has to take over, and that's definitely something this Liverpool team has in abundance.
Yeah, 100%. And what's that? Delayed gratification. So if you know that if you can get over these games, and if you can come out on top and not complain, put your head down, and work through it, the glory at the end of the season will be worth the sacrifices you had to make playing 3 games in 6 days or playing a 12:30 schedule and so on. So if you're going to be a top player earning 150, 200,000 a week, and if you're going to be then winning league titles, Champions League titles, FA Cups, so on, then this comes with that whole package. You need to make these sacrifices, and 10, 15, 20, 30 years from now, if you manage to win everything, people will be talking about you as being part of the best team to have ever played football, like in that era. The same way that we talk about Barcelona 10 years ago, or AC Milan 30 years ago. So that can be City or Liverpool writing their names in history for us to talk about in 10, 20, 30 years time, and even longer. Now, let's get into the Premier League and wrap this pod up, because we've spoken. I think we've given like an hour and a half now just the Champions League alone.
Worth it.
Yeah, especially the first game, the City Real game. But I guess if you're a Liverpool supporter, it's worth it also for the other game. We'll kick things off with, there's actually a midweek fixture. United versus Chelsea at Old Trafford. Just want to get your quick thoughts on that one.
Well, they're playing for the nothing cup, aren't they, really? Chelsea, with that last-minute win against West Ham, should be safe in the top 4 with not many games left. And United, with that loss at Arsenal, should be out of the race for top 4. So, I mean, you've got to think from a United perspective that the rebuild starts now. Can they maybe finish with some sort of pride? Can they just finish with a bit of pride to finish the season? Can they go out and look like a team? Can they play together? Just the basic things that we shouldn't be asking of professionals who are making £300,000 a week. We just shouldn't be asking this crap from them. I mean, this is basic stuff. Can you just go out and look like you want to fight for the people who pay your wages, the people who invest their time to watch you? Can you not be so selfish, and can you just at least fight for them just for the last 4 games? It's not going to get you anywhere. Like, yeah, we want to stay. You've got to want to stay in Europa League, but I mean, a club of Manchester United size, that's not enough. We know that. But can you just show some decency? Because at the end of the day, you get your massive pay packet at the end of the week, and can you just look like you earned it, please? As for Chelsea, I think I was hearing I think on the ESPN FC podcast, one of the pundits or one of the analysts was at the game at Stamford Bridge against West Ham, and he said Tuchel didn't leave his seat for the first half. And being a coach myself, you just know what that means for a coach. It means that they've clocked off. While there's no doubt he's a professional, and he's working with the players on the training ground to try and win these games, I also think there's no doubt that once you lose that edge of 2-3%, that's all it takes at this level. So, but they should be safe in top 4. I think they've downed tools as well. Hopefully, I'm hoping, even though like I'm a Liverpool supporter, and even though you'd think that I love watching this United capitulation, I'm just hoping they show some pride. I think it's more for United than anything for Chelsea. Chelsea want to keep their form going for that FA Cup final, which I believe is the weekend after. But for United, can you just show some decency and some pride in yourselves and and show some decency towards the supporters? I think.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's sort of like a nothing game. Chelsea, they secured they've secured their top three, and United, I don't know. I guess they're playing for Europa League, but at this point, I've seen some United fans say they wouldn't mind missing out on the top seven, so they miss out on Europe completely, so they don't even get Conference League next season. That way, they can sort of have they can have a similar season to Arsenal this season, where they're trying to rebuild or they get a new coach in to try and figure out a system, and there's more time for coaching and on-field play because there's less fixture congestion. So there's only that really. So but like you said, they need to start showing some pride and showing some character before the end of the season, because they are United. They can't just throw games so that they finish outside the top seven. Chelsea, yeah, they got an FA Cup final coming up, so if they come into that FA Cup final, with a bunch of draws and a bunch of losses, that's pretty much Liverpool's to lose. Then it's not going to be as closely contested as what their league ties have been throughout this season. I think both the first one finished 1-1, second one finished 2-2, and then obviously the Carabao Cup final, which was finished on penalties. You want to see that competitiveness, and hopefully this game can sort of trampoline Chelsea towards that bit of form heading into the FA Cup final in a couple of weeks' time. Now we'll touch on
Before you go on to the next fixture, I just wanted to touch on that point you made about how a lot of United supporters will want to finish outside of the top seven, and I get the reasoning for it. But philosophically, I'm totally opposed to that. I mean, you have to breed the right culture. You can never have the attitude that we're going to go in and not deliberately lose games, but not do everything we can to win games. I think it's got to start as soon as it can, and it's the thing that heals all is winning games of football. And I don't think if you can consistently win, I don't think that style of play, however it may happen, I don't think it's bad football if a team can consistently win. So you hear all of this stuff about rebuilding and wanting to watch nice football and stuff like this. That's all well and good. But for me, nice football is football that consistently wins. So your culture must be, we have to win every game we play, especially when you're Manchester United. Your mentality has to be, we go out to win every single game we play. So I'm completely opposed to that. While I get the benefits of it, and I know you only have to look at Liverpool under Brendan Rodgers to see perhaps what the benefits of not being in Europe can be. But ultimately, that thing didn't last. So if you want to be a big club, you have to get into the rhythm of playing European football, then Premier League football anyway. So even if it's not the Champions League and even if it is the Europa League, I think there's benefits from that experience alone. Because sometimes you can get some fool's gold by all that time you've been given to focus on your Premier League fixtures. And then you come back the next season and you realize how tough it is to play Europe and then to play Premier League on the weekend. So for me, philosophically, I'm totally opposed to that. At a top club, you're not paid to play football. You're paid to win football matches. They're two totally different things. Playing football is something you do with your friends at the park on a Sunday. Winning professional football matches is a completely different animal to that. That's not going out there to have fun. That's going out there to do your job, to fulfill your responsibilities, to be accountable for your performance on the pitch, to put yourself on display for the media and for people like us to talk about you. That's what professional football is, and you've got to try and win every game. That's what your job is. Your job isn't to play football, not at that level.
I can get behind that, and yeah, your point in United having to get into the rhythm of playing midweek football and midweek European football, and then Premier League weekend football. Like they need to, and also having to change their culture into a winning culture. They shouldn't down tools at this stage of the season, but I can see it happening, to be honest, because that club right now it's not in a good state and it's rotten. So it's up to Ten Hag to change that culture coming in this summer and coming into next season. Now let's move on to. We'll just quickly touch on obviously a couple of quick games. So Liverpool, Newcastle. Who do you expect to come out on top of that one? Because that's obviously a title decider in a way.
I really like making predictions in terms of games. If you gave me $5 and you said you have to bet on this, just for how important it is for Liverpool to get a result, I think I'd bet on a Liverpool win. However, I mean, I think the football works in the way that, yeah, they're in a great moment, but it can't last forever. Can it last to the end of the season? That's obviously what we're looking to see. But Newcastle away from home, riding a wave, and this team's a good team, and I think they're actually playing for something. Newcastle, I think they're playing to make a statement. If they can get a positive result, or even put in a positive performance that maybe the result doesn't quite go their way, I think Eddie Howe's got to be looking at the bigger picture. And if this group of players can gain confidence from a good result or a good performance against Liverpool, then they'll be right up for the fight to do that. And the manager will definitely be up for the fight to do that and be preparing the team accordingly, because I think he'll understand how important it is to get that momentum rolling and not lose it, considering how much of a run they've been on. If they could take that into the summer and then get the right new players in at the club, obviously with all this newfound wealth, then like we addressed and like I brought up on the last pod with the question of whether it would be them or United in a better position, Manchester United in a better position to finish top four. I just think the end of this season could be a great springboard for them, and this game in particular could be a wonderful springboard for them going into next season. So I'm as confident as I can be with Liverpool, but I acknowledge that Newcastle will be a very tricky test up at St James's Park.
Well, if they're on 43 points at the moment, and they have a couple of tough fixtures. Actually, they have Liverpool, City, and Arsenal. But if they can actually get results out of all those games, they can finish the season on 50 points. And back in January, who would have thought? I think Newcastle they only had was it 15 points or 18 points from 20 games? Who would have thought that they could be looking at finishing with 50 or just close to 50 points? They probably will finish with. I'd say they pick up points only in that last game against Burnley, but they lose. I reckon they lose to Liverpool. They lose to City. They should lose to Arsenal if Arsenal don't do an Arsenal, and they should beat Burnley. But yeah, if they can, they're setting themselves up to have a fantastic 2022-2023 season, and they've sort of built that foundation for them to build upon for next season, like you said, and they could end up having a better season than Manchester United. But I think this is a tougher test for Liverpool than what going to Leeds for Man City is, just because of the form that Newcastle are in, whereas Leeds they're getting some results since Bielsa left, but Leeds are sort of in that limbo zone where I believe they've secured relegation, but they're still very poor on form. So I expect Liverpool to come out on top, and I expect City to come out on top as well in their fixture. And just touching on the other ones, I think the only other two to really touch on is Tottenham, Leicester, and Arsenal, West Ham. So how do you think that those two ties will go?
It's hard to say with West Ham at the moment, obviously with their focus shifting to Europe. But at the same time, they have a very small squad. So when you think that they're going to ring in a lot of changes, it often is the case that I don't know whether it's Moyes doesn't want to do that or he just doesn't have the squad to do that. But they're playing strong enough teams to be competitive. Obviously, you'd think that Arsenal should be riding a wave, especially from fantastic results against Chelsea and Manchester United. But before going into that little run of 2 wins against other sort of top 5 teams or top 6 teams, they were losing to the teams that they were normally beating before. The Crystal Palace, obviously, Brighton and Southampton. So, look, maybe a depleted West Ham play more like one of those teams. And if Arsenal haven't sorted out their demons from those 3 consecutive losses, then who knows? They might be in for another afternoon of nerves and of tough work. I expect them to win, but I can't say with confidence because it's hard for me to get that taste of 3 consecutive losses out of my mouth, even though they somewhat turned it around against Chelsea and United, although the United one could have easily gone the other way on a different day. Spurs, I mean, what can we say about Spurs? I think they'll be benefited from playing a Leicester team who really have nothing to play for and who are managed by Brendan Rodgers, who is not known to shut up shop. So there might be more spaces for particularly Son and even Kulusevski to operate in, and for Kane to look to find in behind. So that might be a saving grace for Tottenham, and maybe they can finally start getting some shots on an opposition goal because they have been very uninspiring in the last 2 weeks. And what looks like their 4th place to lose, they've now got it all on just to get it back, and this is a must-win for them going into, obviously, well, what for them they'd hope is a crucial game against Arsenal, but who knows? We might get to that point, and it's not so crucial if they can't start finding some sort of cutting edge and start creating chances. Because you could even go back to the Aston Villa win. They won that game 4-1, but that first half they were absolutely dominated by Villa. So Tottenham have been unconvincing for a long time. And it does look like it's Arsenal's. I hope that we get a crucial North London derby because that will be some spectacle. So I'm hoping that Tottenham can win, and I guess I am going for a Tottenham win in this one. But both these teams, I can't say it with any conviction. It's kind of like what we're seeing in the race for Serie A at the moment. I know I joked about Inter's game this morning, but they did lose to Bologna and they lost control of the title. That was their game in hand. So Milan stay on top. And yeah, the race for the top 4 in England, the quality and the unpredictability really reminds me of that Serie A race there between those 2 teams. So they're 2 storylines that we got to look for, and I hope Spurs can at least take it to that North London derby. I know you would think otherwise.
I think you've perfectly used the perfect word in unpredictability, because you can't fully put your trust in either of these teams at the moment. So like you said, going into the North London derby, that top 4 could already be sealed for either one of those teams. I think that Arsenal do have the slightly easier tie this weekend just because it's in the middle of West Ham playing their semi-final ties for the Europa League. So we touched on this in one of the previous podcasts. You'd expect them to rest players, and they did rest a couple of players against Chelsea, and Chelsea coming off of a loss against Arsenal. West Ham actually put up a pretty decent result, but they did mostly sit back. They didn't really pose too many threats to Chelsea, and it was more Chelsea just trying to break them down. So if West Ham actually employ a similar tactic, then I wouldn't fully be confident in Arsenal because we have struggled with those low blocks. But if West Ham come out a little bit more open, then I expect us 100% to get that win.
And before you go on, we need to mention also that while West Ham obviously have their Europa League ties, Leicester also have their Conference League ties. And when you get to the semi-finals, I know it's the Conference League, it's third tier European competition, but when you get to the semi-finals, you got to think that will be your priority over the league. So Leicester might also go into that Tottenham game distracted as well.
Does the Conference League winner get like automatic qualification for Europa League or something? Because if that's the case, then that could be the only chance that Leicester get European football next season, because they're going to finish 9th or 10th. They're going to finish outside that top 7. So if they manage to win the Conference League, and there's that sort of similar reward for winning the Conference League, that where you get automatic qualification for the league above. That's actually a really good point that you brought up with Leicester playing.
Yeah, they do, and they do get qualification for the Europa League.
Yeah, and they're playing against Roma as well, so that's a tough game.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's away though, because West Ham's playing at home, so they don't need to travel. Leicester are playing at home as well, so they don't need to travel. So that's actually really interesting. You reminded me of that one where they're both playing actually midweek fixtures before going into the tie on Sunday. Yeah, like it's definitely going to be interesting to see how that all goes. Do you have anything more to add, or any other fixtures that you're interested in talking about?
No, not really. There's obviously the race in Serie A will be interesting, but I don't think they're playing any blue chip fixtures. I think Milan have Fiorentina, so that'll be an interesting one. And then obviously we've got the race for the title and the race for the top 4. And the interesting thing is, you get to this point of the season, I don't think there's obviously some top 4 races around Europe that haven't quite been decided, but none that really capture your imagination, whether it be from, you don't really pay attention to those teams below PSG in France unless someone's actually challenging PSG. Not really in the Bundesliga. And La Liga, it looks like the top 4 is the top 4 in Atletico, Sevilla, Barcelona and Real Madrid. So really in the leagues, there's maybe only 3 storylines that we'll be following until the end of the season, really.
There's only really that. I guess you can also add in the relegation battle in the Premier League, because you do have Burnley versus Watford, and then you also have Chelsea Everton.
Of course, and that's huge with Everton being involved in that as well.
Yeah, so there's not, like you said, there's not really that many races really going on around the continent, except for the Premier League, which still has a title race going on, still has a top 4 race going on, and still has a relegation battle going on as well. So that's pretty much, I think that's going to be a wrap for today. Unless you've got any other thoughts.
I'm good, man. I think we hit what we wanted to hit today.
Yeah, I think we've remembering the Real City game. Oh, that's gonna be so that's gonna be so juicy next week. I can't wait. I'm not really looking. I'm looking forward to this weekend's fixtures because I'm always looking forward to football, but I'm more looking forward to those to that tie on Wednesday. Less so the Tuesday one with Liverpool Villarreal, just because of what the sour taste that it put in my mouth.
Just imagine if we had a playoff system and we didn't have to wait until next week and we just played it on the weekend.
Yeah.
We got to see Real Madrid against Man City again.
Yeah, so you played like every 3 or 4 days, just to give them a little bit of rest. Yeah. But yeah, look, we'll wrap it up there, and hopefully we get some good ties and some good talking points to chat about come next podcast.
Oh, definitely, man. Pleasure as always. Thanks a lot, man.
No worries. Thanks for coming, and bye for now.